So this is coordinate geometry part 6, where we'll be looking at the equation of a circle. So in this video tutorial, we'll be going through how to write down the equation of a circle when you're given the centre and the radius, and also showing you how to find the centre and the radius when you've got unfactorised circle equation. Now at GCSE level, you may have come across the equation of a circle before, and it was usually probably in the format of x squared plus y squared equals r squared, with centre 0, 0 and the radius of r. However, at this particular level, what we're probably looking at is its more generic formula, or universal formula is what I like to call it, which is x minus a squared plus y minus b squared equals r squared, with the centre AB and radius r. So on the diagram, as you can see, in terms of the top one, our centre here is at 0, 0, and with its radius of r, whereas in the second diagram, where the circle is moved away from the centre, we still have our radius of r, but our centre is at the coordinates of AB. Now the key thing to remember about this formula is the sign. So just recognise that when you know the centre and the radius, that the ordinates inside the brackets are negative in its original format, whereas if for example here, if your centre is in the positive quadrant, then you would expect to have a negative a value, negative b value in your formula, whereas if your, let's say, your centre was, let's say, in the second quadrant, then again here you'd be looking for a positive x value because your x would be negative, and a positive and a negative y value. So just take extra care when it comes to the signs of what you're substituting, because this tends to be a very common mistake that a lot of students make. So moving on from that, what we will find is, let's have a look at some questions. So in this particular example here, we've been asked to find or write down the equation of a circle, and here we're given the centre and we are given the radius. So what I've done is just made a little note of the formula that we're going to be substituting into, which is just there. And so with regards to question A, all I need to do there is, just slightly move it up, is substitute these numbers in. So this is my A value, this is my B value, and this is my R. So substituting those numbers straight into that formula, I've got A minus 3 squared plus Y minus 5 squared equals 2 squared. Now I could leave the formula in like this, or I could choose to expand the brackets. Now remembering that this here is x minus 3, and that there is y minus 5. It's a very common mistake that people will just wait and expand this out is just writing y squared minus 25 or plus 25. Either way it's wrong. So expanding this out, we get x squared minus 6x plus 9 plus y squared minus 10y plus 25 equals 4. And then I could either leave it like this, or I could choose to move it to the other side. Now if I do move it to the other side, in terms of these constants move to the other side, I mean, that you might notice and think to yourself, well, hang on a second, we're going to end up with a negative value. Now do remember that in order to work out the centre and the radius of a circle, it needs to be in this format here. So it needs to be in the format of x minus a squared plus y minus b squared, and what that was is that when we do factorise it in this notation, it does prove to be a normal. So what I could have written here is x minus 3 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 4. So either of those, or I could write it like this, or I could write it as x squared minus 6x plus y squared minus 10y equals, and it's going to be minus 30. Like so. So there's so many different ways in which I could write down the final answer. It all depends on you and what you prefer. I would probably tend towards, with this particular question, is writing the question like this, or you could potentially write it like that. So it's entirely up to you how you write the answer, but as long as you're aware that writing your answer in any of these formats will still give you the same thing, then that's the most important thing. So excuse me, moving on to question B. We've got x plus 4, because remember that a is minus and we've already got 2 minus to make a positive, squared, plus y minus 5 squared equals 16. So again, I could leave my answer like this, or I could choose to expand it, in which we get x squared plus 8x plus 16 plus y squared minus 10y plus 25, in which equals 0. So any of those formats would be fine, or I could take the constant over to the side. For part C, again, substituting numbers in, we get x plus 3 squared. Now, as you can see, there is nothing to add to y, so I could write it like this, equals 6 squared, or I could go on to simplify that second bracket, so I just get y squared equals 36. So don't automatically think that you need to have a coefficient of x or a coefficient of y, because what that basically means is that your center ordinate for either the x ordinate or the y ordinate is going to be 0. Now the next thing we move on to is how to find the center and the radius of a circle when you're given its unfactorised equation. So what I'm going to do is, now what I've written down here is some general steps for you to follow, and what I'll do is I'll go through these steps so it's a little bit clearer to understand of what it is we're actually doing. So these are the 4 steps that we're going to follow to expand, to factorise and find the centre and the radius of this equation here. Now obviously what I need to try and do, my end game, is to try and get this in the format of x minus a squared plus y minus b squared equals r squared. Now the first thing we need to do is rewrite the equation pairing the x's and the x squareds together along with the y squareds and the y's, and move the constant to the right hand side. So if I just label this as #1, so explaining what step 1 means is I'm going to rewrite this equation so it looks like that. So as you can see, I've paired together my x squareds and my x's, I've paired together the y squared and the y's, and I've taken the constant over to the other side. Now in regards to step 2, what I now need to do is use completing the square on these pairs. So using completing the square on this is going to be x plus 3 squared minus 9. And again, if you're not too sure about completing the square, there is a video for you to see, and so I recommend you watch that if this is not making much sense. And then factorising, completing the square for this, we get plus y minus 4 squared minus 16 equals 20. And as you can see, this is slowly now taking its shape of what we want it to look like in terms of this format here. And then step 3 is then we need to take the constants over to the side, so we get x plus 3 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals, and we've got 20 plus 25, which is 45. And then for step 4, all we need to do then is relate this to our format here. So as you can see, labelling these, we get a centre of minus 3, because here basically a is the value that makes this bracket equal to 0. We've got a y ordinate of 4, so that's our centre. And our radius, which a lot of students tend to forget and mess up on, is square root of 45. Now if I wanted to simplify that using surds, at this particular stage it's not really necessary, but if you really wanted to, it's 3 root 5. But I would say root 45 is probably the best way to go with regards to your answer. So again, key thing there is don't make sure you take a bit of extra care with the signs that you centre, and also don't forget to square root your radius, because remember that this is equal to r squared. So moving on to another example. So again, let's have a look at those steps. So regards to this here, so let's have a look. So going through the steps, we've got step 1, so let's pair this up. So we've got x squared minus 4x plus y squared minus 10y equals 11. So as you can see, the constant's already onto the right hand side, which is a bit of a bonus. And then all we're now going to do is complete the square. So we've got x minus 2 squared minus 4, and then we're going to have plus y minus 5 squared, and we'll keep having y minus 5 squared, minus 25 equals 11. And then finally, all we then got is y minus 2 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals, and it's going to be 11 plus 25 plus 4, which gives us 40. So here our centre is at 2, 5, and our radius is equal to square root of 40, which again, if you really want to simplify, we can simplify as 2 root 10. But again, I'd probably leave it in its sort of third form, its unsurd form. So moving on to the next question. So here we're going to ask to find the centre and the radius, but again notice here that we haven't got a coefficient of y. So looking at this, going through the first step, we've got x squared plus 10x plus y squared equals minus 2, and then completing the square for this bit here, we get y plus 5 squared minus 25 plus y minus 0 squared equals minus 2. Then the third step is we get x plus 5 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals 23. So note that this should always be positive. So it should always be positive. So if you ever get a negative value, there's something you've definitely done wrong, because obviously the radius is looking at length and you shouldn't have a negative length. So from this we can then write down what our centre is, what our radius is. So our centre, and again, easiest way to remember the centre, it's the values of x and y that make the bracket equal to 0. So here that will be minus 5 and we'll have 0, and our radius is going to be equal to the square root of 23. So hopefully that makes sense on how we write the equation of a circle, and also how we find the centre and the radius of an equation when it's not in its factorised form. If you have any problems at all or would like a worksheet on this particular topic, then feel free to drop me an email at 162maths@gmail.com.